I had a DM from someone who was looking for clarification on whether they should be resting their foot or whether they should be progressing with their exercises. So I thought today, let's clarify exactly what you need to be doing. Hey, Dr. Glenn here from Mehab, the world's leading physical therapy alternative, where our goal is to educate and empower you to take control of your recovery. Determining whether you should be resting or loading your structures really kind of depends on a couple of things. The first is how long ago did you injure it? If it's been a recent injury within the last 3 to 5 days or a re-aggravation of a chronic condition, you are most likely to be in the inflammatory phase. The cardinal sign that you're in the inflammatory phase is you have constant symptoms. It doesn't matter what position that you're in, whether you're resting, sitting, standing, laying, you still have the constant ache and symptoms in your foot. This is because inflammation is a chemical response. We cannot turn it on and off like a light switch. Think of it similar to a fever. It doesn't matter what position you're in when you have a fever, you still have a fever. You can be sitting down, laying down, standing on your head. It doesn't matter, you cannot alter it. It has to run its course. The inflammatory response is just the same. Now, while you can modify it by taking painkillers and anti-inflammatories, generally we try and avoid these as it can interrupt the healing process and result in a weaker structure of the repaired tissue. The challenge when you're in the inflammatory phase, especially when it's your foot, is that it's hard to deload it. Ideally, during this phase, you want to deload the structure and perform exercises that are pain-free and don't cause aggravation. These things could include ankle pumps, moving your foot up and down, writing the alphabet with your foot, drawing circles, just applying a little bit of stress to the structure, but not enough to cause the inflammatory process to prolong or cause more damage. The next part of the phase is the reparative phase. And this is where the tissue is starting to rebuild the structure, it's cleared out all the debris, and we're starting to lay down new tissue. During this phase, you will only get symptoms when you exceed a tissue's tolerance to force. As it works its way through the process, the tissue will become stronger and allow more and more tolerance of higher load activities. The challenge with this phase is that you won't have any pain at rest, and a lot of people perceive that as the tissue is ready to go. The reality is that the tissue still has a low tolerance to activity, and it was very easy to exceed the tissue's tolerance and dump you back into the inflammatory phase. This is where careful and gradual progression of load is important. The last phase is the remodeling phase, where the goal is to progressively increase the load to higher and higher levels so you can return to your normal activities. The goal here should be make that tissue as strong and resilient as possible, and this is why strength training is really important during these phases. This ensures that the tissue repairs correctly and improves its tolerance to load so you can return to your normal activities. When appropriate progression of load is not applied, you can end up with a tendinopathy or a tendinosis. With a tendinopathy, the tissue is actually healed, but it may not have healed correctly and doesn't have a good tolerance to forces. This results in pain with loading activity despite it being healed. Tendinopathies also respond to progressive loading. When you exercise with a tendinopathy, it can produce pain, and it can also linger. This is often because the tissue becomes sensitized. It doesn't mean it's doing damage, it doesn't mean you've hurt yourself, it doesn't mean you've kicked yourself back into the inflammatory phase. This lingering sensitization can cause some fear and worry, but don't worry about it. As long as it fades away, you're fine. Use that intensity and length of sensitization as an indication of whether you should back off from your exercises or you can progress further. If you're finding yourself sensitized for several hours and you cannot tolerate it, what I suggest you do is you back off on the exercise that you're doing, maybe take a step down, maybe do a little bit less, decrease the forces, stick with that for several days, and then try and progress again. So let's sum this all up. If your symptoms are constant, 24/7, aching and throbbing, you're probably in the inflammatory phase. It lasts 3 to 5, maybe 3 to 7 days, provided you don't re-aggravate the injury. If you haven't had a recent re-aggravation and your symptoms are chronic, more than likely your activity is getting you sensitized, and it's nothing to really worry about. Again, just use that gauge on whether you should back off from your exercise or increase your exercises. If you're only getting a little bit of sensitization from maybe half an hour, I'd probably look to start to progress your exercises. If you're finding that you're getting aggravated for several hours and you're pretty uncomfortable, then I would look to back off from the exercise and stay there for a few days before you progress. In an upcoming video, I'm going to show you what I would do if I got plantar foot pain and how it goes through the recovery myself. If you found this information helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, we'll catch you on the next one.